Brian Mars, an American recently left by his fiancée, showed kindness to a homeless woman and her child, giving them a place to stay for the night. Little did he realize this act would change his life forever. Brian, looking sharp as he entered the hospital, couldn't hide his inner turmoil, his brow furrowed in worry. Walking alongside him was his wife, Sophie, equally serious in expression. When the doctor called Brian in, he hesitated, hoping for Sophie's reassurance, only to find her engrossed in her phone, insisting she'd wait outside. Left alone, Brian stepped into the office. Emerging 20 minutes later, shocked by the news, he longed for comfort. "Are we done? Can we go?" Sophie's sharp voice pierced the silence. Brian nodded silently, and they left, the tension between them palpable. Lost in his despair, Brian walked mechanically, barely noticing his surroundings. Sophie, by his side, remained silent, her fingers busy on her phone screen. Stepping into a charming diner, Brian walked out with sandwiches and a juice bottle in hand. Seeing a woman cradling a baby, he made his way over. With a warm smile, he introduced himself and handed over the food, saying, "Here you are. Hope this brightens your day." Initially puzzled and a bit wary, the woman accepted the gesture gratefully, realizing he was just being kind. Amidst that serene moment, Sophie blasted the car horn, yelling out of the window, "Let's go, Brian. This isn't the time for charity." The woman with the baby lowered her head, thanking once more for the food, her voice barely audible. Brian hopped into the car, the engine remaining dormant. "What was that about, Brian? Associating with those people? Are you trying to embarrass me?" Sophie accused, her irritation palpable. Brian defended himself, explaining he was merely aiding someone in need. Sophie retorted, criticizing his heroic demeanor, claiming it did nothing to better their own situation. "Don't you have bigger concerns?" she concluded sharply. Brian fell silent, his expression shutting down. Later that night, with Sophie asleep beside him, Brian sat on the edge of the bed, wrestling with a surge of emotions. It felt as though his deepest desire to become a father was slipping away. He rose quietly, exiting the room and halting before a closed door. Summoning courage, he pushed it open, tears finally streaming down his face. The nursery was adorned with such care, clearly showing the love and effort poured into it. Brian slumped in the armchair, the room cloaked in darkness, and drifted into an unintended sleep. Days later, Brian and Sophie returned to the hospital for the outcome of Brian's latest tests. As usual, Sophie declined to join him, leaving Brian to enter the office alone. Seated, he absorbed the doctor's findings. "I regret to inform you," the doctor's somber tone pierced the silence. "Both the spermogram and DNA test results are conclusive. You are infertile, and biological children are not an option," the doctor concluded. The words hit Brian like a ton of bricks. Wordlessly, he exited the office, weighed down by the crushing news. Sophie, sensing his anguish, asked no questions. Back home, seeking solace in Sophie's embrace, Brian found only simmering anger. "Brian, you know, being a mother has always been my deepest desire. If we can't have a child, I don't see how I can find happiness. It just doesn't seem fair to me," Sophie expressed with a tremble in her voice. Brian countered, insisting his infertility was beyond his control, feeling as crushed by the situation as she did. "If it's not your fault, then whose is it? I'm perfectly capable of conceiving," Sophie retorted, her words piercing Brian deeply. Stunned, Brian found himself at a loss for words. Sophie's accusation had shattered any semblance of their argument. As Sophie packed her belongings, Brian, feeling wounded and utterly alone, watched in silence. "I'm going to stay at my dad's for a while. Someone will collect the rest of my things soon," Sophie announced, closing the door behind her. Brian, consumed by emotion, reached for a bottle of wine from the shelf. Though he had long abandoned alcohol, in that moment he craved nothing more than to numb the pain. After gulping down 2 glasses in quick succession, Brian already felt a haze descending upon him. Crushed by his wife's abandonment and the weight of his troubles, Brian staggered out of the house. Seeking solace, he drowned his sorrows in the dimly lit bars until intoxication enveloped him. Beneath the frigid night sky, Brian trudged slowly towards a bridge. Leaning against its railings, he was engulfed in memories of happier times with Sophie, especially when they joyfully prepared the nursery for their anticipated baby. But now those cherished moments had turned into haunting reminders. His heart was consumed by a rising tide of despair. Hindered by the alcohol coursing through his veins, Brian resembled more of a spectre than a man. A cacophony of voices assailed his mind, yet amidst the chaos, one voice pierced through, the doctor's somber declaration echoing, "You're infertile, incapable of bearing children." Lost in a haze of alcohol and anguish, Brian mimicked the doctor's gestures with a melancholic twist. Brian inched closer to the bridge's edge, feeling the chill wind against his face, a stark reminder of crossing safety boundaries. His mind echoed with haunting questions. What's the point of having a lavish 3-story house, a car, and a hefty bank account if there's no one to share it with? As he hovered on the brink, peering down at the murky waters below, he took a final swig from his bottle. Just then, a distant voice broke his reverie. "Hey, buddy." Initially dismissing it as a mirage, Brian strained his eyes and recognized a woman with a baby mere meters away. She was familiar, the same woman he glimpsed leaving the hospital. Fueled by intoxication, he blurted out, "I remember you." The baby's cry pierced the air, jolting Brian as if awakening him from a stupor. Stepping back from the edge, he inquired softly, "Why is she crying? Did I frighten her?" In a hushed tone, the woman responded, "If I don't eat, how can I feed her?" Hearing this, the businessman squirmed. While he was on the verge of giving up, there were others persevering, unaware of how to even provide for their kids. "Come on, let's grab something for you to eat," Brian mumbled, feeling awkward. The woman eyed Brian suspiciously, but didn't turn down the offer. They headed to a nearby store. The gentle sway of her mother's walk lulled the baby in her arms. Amidst the aisles, the woman introduced herself as Clara, cradling her daughter, Hilda. Brian inquired if she was raising her child alone on the streets. Clara revealed she'd been deserted by her boyfriend upon discovering her pregnancy. Having grown up in an orphanage, she lost both her partner and home in one fell swoop. Clara scraped by with rent for a few months until eviction struck. Brian grimaced at the tale, struck by its personal resonance. "I can't fathom abandoning the mother of your own child," he muttered. Brian expressed his dismay, saying, "This is just not right." It had been a fortnight since Clara and her daughter had been without a home. Despite their hardship, Clara remained poised, eloquent, and sharp-witted. Reluctant to accept assistance from a stranger, the young mother carefully selected discounted goods from the shelves. Brian reassured her, urging her not to fret over prices, but to opt for the best quality. Clara, visibly relieved, flashed a gentle smile, replying, "I'll handle your money with care, as if it were my own. I'll stick with the discounted items. They're perfectly fine." Brian, taken aback, simply nodded in response. Exiting the store, Brian suggested, "Hey, I live solo now. Got a spare room at home. You and your daughter could crash there tonight." Clara, instantly wary, handed back the bag of items she'd received. "Thanks, but no thanks. I'll keep moving forward on my own. Catch you later." Brian empathized with Clara's caution, acknowledging, "I get it. You're wary." And rightly so, I'm just a stranger. But I promise, no hidden agendas. Today, my wife walked out on me, and I nearly made a big mistake in a moment of weakness. You and your daughter might have saved me from that, and I'll always owe you for it. I'm a good person, and I just want to give back." At that moment, the baby in Clara's arms smiled at Brian, made a cute sound, and then burst into laughter. Baby Hilda was having fun watching Brian's expressions. That laughter from his daughter made Clara relax a bit. She remembered the day she received the sandwich and juice from that same man, and how the woman in the car had shouted at him, "We'll just eat and take a shower, and then we'll leave, okay?" Clara said. Brian smiled and replied, "Sure, deal." The three of them went to Brian's house, and upon arriving at the place, Clara was wide-eyed. It wasn't a luxurious mansion, but it was more than the woman had ever had. Brian led her to the living room and put the groceries on the table, excusing himself to leave the room. When he returned, he handed Clara some outfits. "Got these for my ex, but she wasn't into them. They're up for grabs if you like. Also got these tiny clothes for your little one, and there's a bathroom over there." Brian gestured towards a door. "Make yourselves comfy. I'll whip up something quick for dinner." Clara gathered her daughter and headed to the suite. Stepping in, she noticed it was fully set for a baby, puzzling her. After bathing and nursing Hilda to sleep, Brian had dinner ready and was taken aback when Clara reappeared with Hilda cradled in her arms. The woman he had seen on the street moments ago seemed entirely different now. Clara gently placed Hilda on the couch in the living room and took a seat at the table. The young mother eagerly ate her meal. Brian watched her with tenderness, understanding her challenges. Beside her, Hilda rested comfortably and safely for the first time in weeks. In that instant, a new feeling stirred within Brian, providing him with a sense of reassurance and warmth. He was, even if only in his mind, experiencing the feeling of being part of a loving family. Brian decided to steer clear of delving into Clara's past or broaching any uncomfortable subjects. He got the gist of it. Clara and Hilda depended solely on him for support. "Got any kids?" Clara started a conversation. Brian hesitated before responding. With a trembling voice, he revealed his inability to have children, despite his fervent desire to become a father. "I was convinced I'd be a dad soon. I decked out the nursery, prepared everything, even dreamed about it. But my dream turned into a nightmare after numerous failed attempts with my ex-wife," he shared, still shaky. Sensing Brian's emotional vulnerability, Clara promptly apologized for touching on such a sensitive topic, and Brian reassured her. "No worries, Clara. If anything, I should be sorry. I've never been this exposed before. I felt like I was sinking into darkness. If it weren't for you—" Brian trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, as Clara gently laid her hand on his. "It's all good now. We all have our dark sides, but we must have faith in ourselves and recognize when help is extended. That's why I accepted your invitation," Clara affirmed. Brian experienced a rare moment of deep understanding, unlike any he had felt in a while. Surprisingly, it didn't come from his partner of many years, but from a stranger he had met on the street just days ago. After dinner, Clara lifted Hilda from the couch. Brian suggested they sleep in the baby's room, and this time Clara didn't hesitate. She carefully placed Hilda in the crib, noticing the room's cozy decorations and every loving detail. Tears filled her eyes as she watched her daughter sleep soundly under the gentle glow of the bedside lamp. Suddenly, Brian appeared in the doorway, his smile warm and genuine, bidding them both a good night before quietly slipping away. In that moment, Clara couldn't help but picture Brian passing by the room each day, knowing he would never hear the laughter of a child within those walls. The following morning, Clara woke to the gentle nudges of Chips, another inhabitant of Brian's household. Chips, fond of Clara and her daughter, greeted Clara by rubbing against her leg, purring contentedly and playfully tapping her ankle with his paw. "Good morning, Clara," she exclaimed, offering affectionate scratches behind the cat's ear. Brian, already up and about, swiftly prepared a breakfast spread of coffee, toast, eggs, and assorted fruits. Mid-meal, Brian's phone alarm startled him, a reminder of an urgent business trip he had nearly forgotten amidst the recent chaos and the previous night's revelry. Urgently, Brian informed Clara of his impending departure, reassuring her that she could stay without inconvenience. Clara hesitated, prompting Brian to assert, "We must learn to accept assistance, mustn't we? There's no point in you and Hilda sleeping on the streets when this apartment will be vacant. And who will care for Chips in my absence?" Brian concluded with a convincing smile. After a moment of contemplation, Clara gave her consent, bringing a sigh of relief to Brian. Before departing, Clara quickly made a sandwich for him, expressing her eagerness for his return in a shy manner. As Brian bid farewell at the door, he couldn't shake the feeling of missing Clara and Hilda. "I'll come back as soon as possible. Please wait for me," he earnestly told her. "I feel something truly special and genuine between us." Clara nodded in agreement as Brian took his leave. Over the following weeks, Brian and Clara connected daily through video calls. Amid laughter and deep conversations, Clara also introduced Brian to her daughter, Hilda. Their bond strengthened each passing day. Despite Sophie's divorce request, Brian found more joy in conversing with Clara than he ever did with his ex-wife. Returning from his journey, Brian held a bouquet of fresh white roses as he arrived home. The time away had brought clarity, unveiling his genuine desires. Filled with newfound confidence, he turned to Clara and posed the question, "Could you see yourself as my girlfriend?" Overwhelmed with emotion, Brian poured his heart out to Clara, who reciprocated, sealing their newfound love with a kiss. As their bond deepened over time one evening, Brian tenderly carried Hilda as they exited a restaurant. Unexpectedly, they encountered his ex-wife, Sophie, at the entrance, her astonishment palpable. Brian's composed demeanor affirmed to him that he had chosen wisely. Sophie, bewildered, stammered, "Brian, is that really you? And who is this little one?" Brian, unfazed, headed to his car, gently explaining, "Apologies, my daughter needs her rest. Good night." With a tender grasp on Brian's waist, Clara joined him, tears restrained as she affirmed her daughter's newfound father. As Clara and Brian exchanged vows, their hearts intertwined at the altar. Brian's friends and acquaintances marveled at this unforeseen and beautiful union, offering genuine wishes for the couple's joy. Side by side, Clara and Brian led their daughter to the car. With the engine humming to life, Brian guided them toward a future filled with love and obstacles, embodying the role of the father and husband he had always imagined. If you enjoyed the story, a like would be appreciated. You might also find the suggested video moving. Enjoy your time and see you in the next video.